Hello and welcome to another episode of Not Too Deep. I'm your host, Grace Helbig. It is my honor, privilege, pleasure, and total fucking excitement to tell you that this week's episode is with the one and only John Green. We had such a great conversation that I didn't want it to end. Spoiler alert, we talk about his new book, The Anthropocene Reviewed, based on his hit podcast, The Anthropocene Reviewed. He and his brother, their podcast, Dear Hank and John, and we get into some pretty deep questions and comments in the conversation about mental health, the YouTube journey of it all, social media of it all, and his thoughts on parenting. And it's just like there's a lot that we talked about, and I had a really great time talking about it. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode as much as I did. Enjoy Not Too Deep with John Green. All right, John Green. This is so exciting.
It's nice to see you, Grace.
It's nice to see you too. Last time I saw you, it was a wedding festivity and it was joyous and fun and strange and overwhelming and just social for the first time.
Yeah, it was one of the first, and as it would turn out, only weekends where I felt truly free and alive and as if my choices were not being circumscribed by a single strand of RNA.
Yeah.
And it was awesome. And I'm clinging to that memory of Hannah and Ella's wedding and hanging out with you for as long as I can.
You really did look like you were set free. It took me a second to get myself to process that it was okay to have, like, to be having as much fun as I was. Because I think just being conditioned over the last year to worry that you're not doing something appropriately to the course of the world at the same time. But every time I looked over, I felt like you were holding court and you were just letting it all go.
I had a great weekend. Like, Sarah and I had so much fun. Also, like, we had not spent, I love my children immensely, endlessly, but we had not spent a night away from them in a year and a half. So, like, we had a great time.
Well, what's the over under on when you start to miss them and want to be back with them once you leave them?
Oh, usually, the weird thing is that before this, I traveled for work so much, and it felt inevitable and it felt natural and it felt like the only way that I could possibly do what I do. Mm-hmm. And then, like, when I canceled 45 Delta flights over the course of a month and a half, I was like, maybe this isn't as inevitable as it seemed. And so, like, in those days, I would miss the kids the second I left the house, because I would just, I don't yet know what the COVID date is, because Sarah and I were gone for 2 days and we were still enjoying each other's company quite a lot.
I'm sure. But it's also nice to know that you can spend that much concentrated time with your children and still have such joy about them.
Yeah. It is really nice to get a different kind of close to them. I do feel like for a lot of their early lives, like, I just wasn't there. Like, I was on the phone, I was on FaceTime. I wasn't always in the room. And then, for the last year and a half, I have been pretty much always in the room. And that has been really valuable. And I've learned a lot from it. Like, I've learned a lot from them.
Yeah.
And so, I'm always suspicious of attempts to brightside the pandemic. This has been an unmitigated horror. And I know everybody's lost a lot, and some people have lost everything. Yeah. So I don't want to make it sound like, it's great because I get to spend so much time with my kids.
Sure, yeah.
But I am glad that I had this revelation that I did not need to be traveling.
How old are they now?
They're 11 and 8.
Wow. Okay. So as someone that doesn't have children, what do you do, or maybe you're doing it, or maybe it hasn't happened yet, when you start to see qualities of yourself in them that you don't want them to have?
Yeah, it's interesting, like seeing that sort of stuff in my kids. a lot of times I do see some upsides to it. You know,
Mhm.
I worry for them much more than I ever worried for myself,
Yeah.
because I think that's just the nature of it. And you know, there's a big part of when you're a parent, like I just want to save them from pain of
Yeah, yeah,
any
yeah.
kind. You know, like
Mhm.
I just want to. I want them to. I want to save them from heartbreak. I want to save them from having fights with their friends.
Mhm.
I want to save them from whatever they're going to have to go through. But of course, like A, I can't. And
Right.
B, that's not actually what they need. Like they don't need me to like run in and try to jump on the grenade. They need to be able to go through it and live their own lives and know
Mhm.
that, you know, Sarah and I are there to support them. And so that's what I've been trying to do. But there are moments when I wish like, oh, I wish I could solve this problem for them, or oh, I wish they didn't have to deal with this.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it really tests your control issues of wanting to totally smother them
Yeah.
completely
I
and keep
mean,
them from the dangers and horrors of the world and humans.
yeah. Yeah. And I mean, there's something very strange about being a parent, right? Which is that, like, almost from the moment they're born, they're not just growing up, they're also growing away from you. Like,
Mhm.
the extent to which they need you, or and the ways in which they need you change so much, even in the
Yeah,
first few years. And so you have to make room for that because they are going to have to live their lives. Like, first off, I'm not going to be able to live their lives for them. Secondly, I don't
that'd
think
be
it would be
weird.
advisable. Like,
Yeah, that would be strange.
yeah. And so I'm not going to be able to make their choices for them, and they're going to have their lives. And yeah, that can be a
Yeah.
little heartbreaking sometimes, but it's also the way it should be.
Yeah, because I feel like the opposite of that is if you were to make all the choices for them, I think that's like the premise of Dead Mommy Dearest. Of
Yeah.
of that
Yeah.
situation. So I think not going that route might
You
be
don't want to go
healthier
that far.
for you and them. Um, okay, I want to talk to you about the Anthropocene Reviewed, both the podcast and the book. I'm curious because this is a bit of a departure from what the content that you normally create. What was the catalyst behind
Yeah.
starting this?
Oh, I think in large part wanting to make a large departure from the books that I had written before. I
Okay.
mean, I wrote a book called The Fault in Our Stars that came out
Hmm.
almost 10 years ago, and in the wake of that book coming out, it really changed my life in quite dramatically in lots of wonderful ways, but in also ways that were very stressful.
Hmm.
And I spent the next 5 years, you know, desperately trying to write another book, another novel about teenagers, and I finally did. And I felt really grateful that I was able to write that book, Turtles All the Way Down, for a lot of
Hmm.
reasons. But you know, in no small part because it meant that I had overcome this block or this
Hmm.
stress that I had around publishing. But you know, when I was out promoting that book in 2017, when I was out promoting Turtles All the Way Down, I just felt like I didn't want to do this anymore. Like I didn't want to. I just wanted to do something different. I had
Hmm.
come to find, you know, writing had always been like an escape for me, like a way out of the prison of my consciousness, you know, like a way
Yeah,
to
I get
imagine what
it.
it might be like to be someone else. And I
Yep.
think acting may in some ways be similar, but it had really stopped feeling fun, and it had really started to feel stressful and scary, and like I was really worried that people were gonna hate everything I wrote. And I was just pretty lost.
Hmm.
And my brother and I, on that tour that we took in 2017, I would always tell him this joke that I wanted to start a podcast called The Anthropocene Reviewed, where I just like wrote Goodreads reviews, but in like highly in-depth Goodreads reviews, but instead of like reviewing books or restaurants or whatever people are reviewing, I would review like humanity's capacity for wonder and and Diet Dr. Pepper and a
Yeah.
movie I like from 1950. And I got home and I was like, you know, that joke is that's not a
There's
bad
something
idea.
there. Yeah.
And so I started writing them, and immediately it was the most fun I'd ever had writing. Like writing
Mm.
nonfiction was hugely freeing. Writing, you know, being able to write about myself for the first time in my life was scary, but like also really freeing. And
Cool.
it was so much fun from the very beginning. And then, I got to kind of live my dream of making a podcast with WNYC and having amazing people do record original music around the stuff that I was writing. And it was just a wonderful, wonderful experience. And then it turned into a book, which has also been a wonderful experience. And I have a lot of complaints in this world, but man, the experience of publishing this book has just been perfect.
It's I think you kind of like buck the system by putting a very positive, like you say, wonder as a term when I think it could be criticized. And so you put like a very uplifting sort of spotlight on what you're doing, which could easily be rants from John Green.
Oh yeah, no, there's a part of me that wanted to go like full snark, and just talk about stuff I hate and how much I hate it and how outrageous it is. I know how to get retweets, but
I mean, I feel like that's what you do on Dear Hank and John.
Yeah, we definitely go there sometimes. In this book, I wanted to I think I've started to feel like online right now, like the most radical way to be is to be radically earnest and willing to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
And so I really wanted to try to do that in this book. I really wanted to try to strip down the armor of cynicism and irony that I've used for my entire career to be able to protect myself from the various slings and arrows of living a public life online.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to kind of put that stuff down and just try to reckon earnestly with the world as I found it, which was definitely intimidating. But I mean, the nice thing about podcasts is that people don't really hate listen to them, you know?
Yeah, because that's a lot more effort.
Yeah, right. People will hate watch a YouTube video and then they'll click thumbs down and they'll write a comment why you're so terrible.
Yeah.
People don't really do that with podcasts. If they're listening to this, earnest person's podcast about the history of Piggly Wiggly or whatever, they'll just stop listening if they don't like it.
Yeah, and if they do try to hate watch, it's just a very transparent indication of where they're at psychologically.
Yeah, right. I bet you've had a rough week because I know I hate watch stuff sometimes, and it's never when things are going great.
Yeah, but when you gave me 45 minutes of your time and then found on the Apple Podcast app to leave a review, thank you, and also maybe you should talk to someone.
Yeah, my brother and I actually share a YouTube account. We only watch YouTube videos logged in as Vlogbrothers. Yeah. And so I can see everything he hate watches and it'll affect my recommendations. And then I'll call him and I'll be like, "Hey, stop. This is bad for all of us. You're messing with my algorithm. I'm just trying to watch Tetris highlights and you're out here engaging with the alt-right. I don't like it."
Oh no, I feel like that's wonderful blackmail just to release all the videos that Hank watches privately for everyone. I know I would love any kind of content like that. So turning it into a book, writing about yourself, I think is really beautiful. Like you said, being able to put down sarcasm and cynicism and open curiosity and wonder is really difficult to do when your go-to tools are cynicism and sarcasm.
Yeah.
But also really freeing. I think that kind of goes in line with I listened to Dear Hank and John and the Anthropocene Reviewed, and I feel like you have had this kind of growth where you talk more candidly about your mental health. Has that been a conscious choice, or has it just been kind of naturally through your own growth and evolution?
Yeah, it has been a conscious choice to an extent. Mm-hmm. It's a weird balance, and I don't know if it's like this for you too, but for me, I have to balance. There's a few things I have to balance. First, I'm not an expert. Right. I have been crazy my whole life, and so I know a lot about it from the inside, but I don't know. Yeah. I'm not a psychologist. I can't dispense psychological advice, and I want to be very careful to stay on that end of the spectrum. Mm-hmm. But I feel like it's important to talk about for a few reasons. One is that you know, we are talking more about mental health, which I think is really important, but it is still heavily stigmatized
Mm-hmm.
around the world. Like there are not a lot of places where it isn't stigmatized.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the reasons it's so stigmatized is that illnesses that are difficult to treat, or that we don't have perfect treatments for, often are more stigmatized. Like that's one of the hallmarks of a highly stigmatized disease.
Yeah.
And, you know, I mental illness is almost always treatable. I think pursuing treatment is extremely important. It is the reason why I'm able to have a healthy and fulfilling life.
Mm-hmm.
But so I want to be able to be out there telling that story, that like I have lived with the serious mental illness pretty much my entire life, but I also have a very good life.
Mm-hmm.
And there are times, like with any chronic illness, where I am very unwell and it sucks and it's scary and it's really really awful.
Yeah.
But there are also lots of times when things are good, and when it's well controlled, and I expect that to probably be the case for the rest of my life, and it can still be a good and fulfilling life. And that I think that's kind of more the norm, actually.
Yeah.
But we don't hear those stories as much. So I guess that's why I feel like I should talk about it.
I really appreciate that perspective because, yeah, I'm someone that also deals with mental health issues, and I don't like to be too forthright about it in a lot of things. But I do worry sometimes that, you know, the talking about it and normalizing the conversation leads to like commodifying or exploiting.
It's such a fine line.
That bothers me so much when I feel like I'm seeing that happen, but there's no way for me to prove that that's what's happening, because that would be very insensitive to do.
Right.
So, but I do appreciate that you're taking the steps like authentically when it makes sense to talk about what you're experiencing without trying to put the illness on a pedestal or define yourself by it in some way.
Yeah, I think that there is that's, you know, the way that I try to think about that is I don't want to settle for bad mental health. Like I don't want to, you know, to have that be a core identifier of myself, because I want to continue to try to find good treatment strategies that work for me.
Yeah.
And honestly, like I can't work when I'm not well. So like,
same.
You won't see me on YouTube because I can't do it. And like, I just can't. And so I need to be well to do the work that I love. I need to be well to be with the people I love in the way that I want to be with them. And I know I can't always be well. And I know sometimes I have to like make accommodations to that reality, but I want to keep working toward having better mental health.
That's great. I think that's, you know, I know you're doing it for yourself, obviously, but it impacts so many people, which is like a lovely byproduct of you just working on yourself.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to take one quick break. When we get back, I have, guess what, more questions for you. We'll be right back with more Not Too Deep.
Not Too Deep with Grace Helbig.
Hello, listeners. Grace Helbig here, wanting to say two things. A big thank you for listening to the podcast. If you're a regular listener, if this is your first time listening, welcome and thank you. And second thing, if you are enjoying yourself here in this not too deep world we've built and you'd like to leave us a review, that would be so wonderful. If you can go to the iTunes store, the App Store, and leave us a lovely little review, comment. How are you feeling? Good, bad, otherwise? Maybe just good or otherwise would be appreciated. Other than that, enjoy the podcast. Okay, couple of questions. In talking about creating content, creativity, all of that, I've heard you and your brother talk about this a little bit on your podcast. Do you schedule your creativity, or at least try to? Let's consider mental health isn't acting up or flaring up in any way.
Yeah, I mean, I make schedules and I also try to make allowances, but I mean, my experience of it, I mean, Hank and I have been making YouTube videos for almost 15 years. I've made
Wild.
a video almost every Tuesday for like, I don't know, like 600 Tuesdays or something.
Jesus.
And my experience of it has been that I have better ideas when I'm subjecting myself to that schedule than I would have if I weren't. I do better because I get in the rhythm. Because really, like, I don't know where ideas come from, but I do know that I have more of them if I'm in a position where I need to have them. Like, that's just always been the way. Yeah. But with writing books, though, it's very different because, like, sometimes it'll be 5 years between me writing a book, and sometimes it'll be 3 years. I think once it was 6 years. And that's just such a different experience for me because it's so difficult and detail oriented. And I don't really need to have one idea like I do for a YouTube video. I need to have like 72,000 ideas that I have to figure out how to stitch together.
Yeah.
So that's definitely a challenge.
Well, in stitching your ideas together and choosing what you wrote about for Anthropocene Reviewed, what was was there a process in which the things you reviewed made the cut? Was there a system? There
wasn't a strong system. It was really...
That's how I describe my digestive system.
Yeah, mine too.
Not a strong system.
I don't have a lot of strong systems.
Yeah, I think my log line is a weak system.
Yeah. I mean, I guess like when I was thinking about turning it into a book, I was thinking about there being sort of two arcs to the book. One is an arc from a kind of state of hopefulness very early in the pandemic to a state of despair, and then trying to write my way back into a state of hopefulness. And the other is much looser, but is sort of takes from childhood when I was fascinated by things like scratch and sniff stickers and Halley's Comet, into like my early adulthood when I suffered some mental health crises, into becoming a parent myself and being with my kids and learning from them. So I wanted it to sort of have a loosely chronological biographical structure while also having this structure about despair. But then sometimes I would just really like an essay, so I would put it in,
It's your rules. You're your own Outback Steakhouse.
That's right.
Do you actually like Dr. Pepper? Diet Dr. Pepper? Thoughts on it? Okay.
I do. Do you not like it?
I love it. I think it's great. Oh,
good. Yeah, it's awesome.
Diet Dr. P, I go for it all the time. It wasn't until I heard you describe that they're their own independent soda company. I had no idea.
No, they're not owned by Coke or Pepsi. They're the largest non-Coke or Pepsi soda company in the United States. And also, I mean, the whole history of Dr. Pepper fascinates me. But I think the main thing that fascinates me is that it was the first, at least so far as I can tell, it was the first artificial like soda drink ever created that was not designed to taste like something in the real world. It was designed by this pharmacist to taste the way that the soda fountain in Waco, Texas, where he worked, smelled.
So he found a unique smell, wanted to translate it to flavor,
and then worked to translate it to flavor using his pharmaceutical skills.
Wow! Can you imagine if he met Guy Fieri? I feel like there'd be no end.
A great rivalry. Yeah, I mean, it's
either
true.
A rivalry or the beautiful collaboration.
Yeah, right. Or the best restaurant in the history of the world.
Yeah, whatever. They have four tables and 20 bathrooms because whatever comes in is going to go out real bad.
Got those.
Insane. Okay, John, we're going to get into now the two questions I ask every single guest that is here on the podcast.
Yes.
And the first is, who, alive or dead, would you most like to throw cold spaghetti at?
I mean, there's a lot of great candidates.
Yeah. Well, this is something we consider is your answer as of this moment it obviously can change hour to
Sure.
hour, day to day.
Yeah, I don't want to make a lifetime commitment because
Yeah.
I do think that someday I will be in a position to throw cold spaghetti at someone, and I want to be able to change at the last second.
Yeah, someday YouTube collaborations will open back up again, and those sorts
Yeah.
of challenges will be
It's going to be a great challenge. Yeah, which YouTuber would you like to collaborate with by throwing cold spaghetti on him is not a difficult question for me, but also one I think I'm going to choose not to answer.
Okay.
So almost everyone I've ever known in my life, I think, like, even if they weren't like good people or like we didn't share value systems or whatever, like I almost always feel like they're doing their best, Like even I got beat up a lot in middle school and it was really difficult and it sucked. And I don't want to take anything away from how much it sucked. But like, I think back now on those kids and like they were also in middle school, which is terrible. And it's a hard thing to go through and they were doing their best. There is one person who I do not think was doing his best. I sponsor a third-tier English soccer team called AFC Wimbledon. And the Pete Winkleman is his name. He's got a Bond villain of a name and a Bond villain of a face. And he took Wimbledon away from their spiritual, ancestral, longtime homeland of South London, moved the team 60 miles away to Milton Keynes. And I don't think that he was doing his best. And I would throw some cold spaghetti on him.
Is there a connection between, is this the same guy from your middle school?
No.
Okay.
No.
I was going to say, that's the most outrageous story if your middle school bully grew up and took your favorite AFC team and moved it away. I'd be like, what a long con.
No.
That would have been incredible.
He doesn't even really apologize for being a cartoon villain.
It's a great name.
I've never met him, but I
don't need to.
I probably don't need to. But if I do, and there's cold spaghetti nearby, he better watch out.
I know, we're talking about how to best support your mental health, and I don't think you need to interact with this man. I think that might be a little regressive for you.
Might take me back. Yeah.
Okay. The other question I ask every single guest on the podcast is to tell us your worst pants shitting story or like a bathroom emergency situation, but you can only use 3 words or like a combination of small phrases to describe the event. So, for example, mine is college, jogging, front lawn.
Okay. Mine is
I'll let you relive the memory.
Unfortunately, I have a couple choices. I wish I didn't.
Appreciate that so much. There are often guests that are like, I don't have one, which I also respect. But
I bet
it makes me wonder.
They don't. I bet they don't. Yeah, I mean, I guess the worst one was airplane landing, flying home.
Oh, wow. All right, no follow-up questions there.
Great.
Really paints a picture for us. Appreciate you picking
I had a stark choice, Grace. I had a stark choice.
Yeah, so did that pilot, it sounds like.
They're saying it's dangerous for there to be someone in the bathroom while the plane is landing. And I'm saying it's also dangerous for there to be someone not in the bathroom while the plane is landing.
It's dangerous for this person to not be in that bathroom when we're landing.
There's widespread agreement that we have a bad choice in front of us.
Yeah, I wonder, because I understand that I do not understand the safety regulations on planes the way that the team that works on planes obviously do. But I do wonder if we'll ever get to a point where you are allowed to be in the restroom on takeoff and landing.
Yeah, just in an emergency.
I will say, it's good that you were closer to your home than had you been landing in the place that you were coming from.
That's a great point. I mean, I'll tell you what, I wasn't looking at that silver lining in the moment, but it's really nice to be reminded that it could have been worse.
It could have been worse. That's me trying to lower my cynicism about everything.
Beautiful.
Okay, now we're going to take a little bit of a turn, get back to some more serious-ish questions. we have a section of the podcast called Deep and Hot, where I'm going to ask you a deep question that we've prepared for you and ask for your hot take on something we've prepared for you.
Great.
So, deep question. If an artist says a piece of their art was done without any meaning, like a random squiggle, splash of colors, whatever, does the purposeful meaningless matter more than the meaning that an audience might assert over the art?
Great question, and one that I've spent a lot of time thinking about and writing about. And my personal belief is that the art belongs to the people who are looking at it, and books belong to their readers. And if they find meaning in that work that isn't contradicted by the text, if they find meaning in an artwork that isn't contradicted by the image, then the meaning can be perfectly legitimate regardless of whether the author intended it.
What do you mean by contradicted?
I mean that, like, if you read Animal Farm and you decide this is a pro-communist novel, you have made a mistake.
Okay.
and that reading isn't legitimate, and that meaning that you found isn't there.
Okay, gotcha.
But I think there can be lots of things in Animal Farm or any number of other books that the author may not have intended, but that are still meaningful, and that meaning can still be useful and helpful to people who are reading it. I don't take a lot of stock in authorial intent, not least because I am an author, and I know we lie about this stuff all the time. Like, nobody is less reliable than an author talking about their own work and whether they intended something, because, like, there's like a famous example where, like, William Faulkner was really drunk and angry, and somebody asked him if he intended this, like, obvious Garden of Eden scene to be a Garden of Eden scene. And he was like, no, of course not. It's ridiculous. It's like, you're reading the scene and you're like, I mean, there's a snake and an apple and a bird, like two people.
Adds up.
Yeah, it just feels a little Garden of Eden-y. So yeah, I don't trust authors.
I mean, like, I got different thoughts about Shakespeare and all of that kind of stuff. I'm like, was this guy that great? I feel like,
well, I think there's that impulse, especially when you're in English classes and like things are being analyzed at such a level that it, like, really does feel absurd. And it also, I think for casual readers, it feels very far removed from the way that they read and from what they enjoy about reading. And I totally get that. But I also think that, like, you know, a really good book should work on multiple levels. Like, a really good book should be purely fun to read, and it can provide that. Like Salinger would write about the reader who reads and runs, and, like, there's a lot of value in the reader who reads and runs. But I also think, like, a really good book, like, should hold up to some level of critical reading.
Yeah, I would imagine, but that's maybe just me, that it might be kind of lovely to find from readers interpretations that weren't necessarily outright, but might have been part of your, unconscious while you're doing it.
Yeah, I think that's very real. Like, things that I was pointing to without quite knowing that I was pointing to it. Or even, I mean, in the case of some metaphors, like, metaphors that come back again and again, like certain colors, like people have pointed out the certain, like, color palette in Paper Towns that, like, I wasn't totally conscious of when I was writing, but, like, I was trying to make people feel like he felt like his life was somehow, like, supernaturally bright when this girl was in it, and then, like, very different and sort of dimmer when she wasn't in it. But that was supposed to be part of his obviously misimagining her, seeing her life as being primarily about him.
I'm studying about depth psychology right now, and that seems to tap into collective unconscious, that we all kind of have these underlying things that are part of the big other going on. Okay, now I want your hot take on something. Let's see. This is not the best way to phrase this, but what are your thoughts on genuine curiosity versus, like, just drive in creating content? Like, you kind of touched on this earlier, where you said, if I'm not feeling well, like, I can't make a video, I can't make content. So what are your thoughts on, like, I guess, like, the passion and curiosity for creating content versus the hustle or drive mentality of like consistency of content, must keep creating?
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't know what it's been like for you, Grace. I'd be interested to hear your answer to this. I think the hustle felt necessary for me for a long time, and it also worked really well for me for a long time. And I didn't really notice the costs, which were high.
Yeah.
And I also didn't notice when I stopped making something because I was curious and because I was passionate and because that was exactly what I wanted to do on a Tuesday more than I wanted to do anything else. And so my experience overall over the last 15 years has been that stuff waxes and wanes, that it's a sort of sine wave, and that when it's down, it feels like it will always be down. And when it's up, it feels like it'll always be up. But in fact, like another wave is always going to come.
Yeah.
I guess what I don't feel anymore that I felt for a long time was this like urgent desire not to like lose the status or the whatever that came with getting a certain number of views on every video and like really, really wanting that. I guess the way that it's resolved for me at the moment is that I don't feel the need to hustle, but I do still want to make videos on Tuesdays. I just don't care if they get view so like I don't do thumbnails anymore, like because I don't know that I actually want extra people to see the video, like I'm kind of making it for the people who are going to already going to watch it, and I don't know that I really do want the rest of YouTube to watch it. That's where I'm at the moment.
Yeah, I get that. I feel that on a lot of layers of just the pivot from being caught in a rat race almost and losing what your actual perspective is or genuine opinions are about making content or what you're doing versus like finding like the actual desire, passion to make something because you want to make something. But it is a constant like checking in with yourself on it. And like you said, ebbs and flows. And when it's down, it feels like it's gone forever. And when it's up, it feels like it'll never go away. And so it's inspiration all around is a tricky mistress, I think.
It is. And also there's something very weird about what we do that didn't even exist really 10 or 15 years ago, right? Which was like, there were no TV shows that lasted 15 years except for The Simpsons. Like, things would get to this. Yeah, things would get to like the 6th or 7th season, and then people would be like, "Wow, what a great run! Let's stop doing this."
Yeah.
And that didn't. There was no version of that. There was there was no version of that for us. Like, we didn't have models on how to make less content or how to make a different kind of. It just and so I found that and find it like still pretty confusing not having that model. This
is a world I'm hyper fascinated in and like stuff that I'm kind of studying on the side and trying to wrap my head around because like humans naturally need to evolve and grow physically, emotionally, spiritually, all of it. And when you are stuck creating and it is like burned into your brain, this kind of like system of creating a brand that is yourself, that is front facing, and you are, pouring it out, like just putting it all out into these like machines. How can you like, unless you're very, very good at stepping away and taking a break and collecting yourself, you can get very lost in your own personal evolution and then become just the persona side of you versus like the human side of you or the deeper inner self side of you. And I think that's what's going to be studied a lot lately.
I think there's going to be a lot. I think that's a really interesting place to be doing research because I think that the shrinking distance between the performed self and the experienced self.
Yep.
You are on the very leading edge of having experienced that, but
but I can say firsthand, it'll fuck you up.
It fucked me up really badly.
Yeah.
Like really badly. And it was by far the most overrated experience I've ever had.
But it also seems so stupid at the same time.
Yeah, but I think everybody is going to have some version of this because,
for sure.
So many millions of young people are creating content on TikTok or Instagram and defining themselves and their understanding of themselves in part by their success on those platforms.
Mm-hmm.
And, just like TV shows run for 7 years, like things change. That's just the nature of time.
Yeah.
And if you've got no distance between your performed self and your experienced self, like injuries to your performed self feel like they are to your very core.
Yeah. When the personal and the persona are one, then there's actually that's too much investment in one franchise. Like
yeah. My brother always talks about diversifying your identity and making sure that like you can think of yourself as being more than one thing. But I also think, another element of this is that we don't have another way to we don't have another job. Like
I know I say you have to have part of your life that's not monetized. There has to be some area of your world that has no opportunity to be monetized and will never be monetized. At least, who knows?
Yeah,
that's
something that's really, really important to me as well.
Okay, we have to take one last break. When we get back, we have a question that you and I can give listeners some helpful advice on, because look how helpful we are so far. We'll be right back with more Not Too Deep.
Not too deep with Grace Helbig.
John, let's try and answer a question submitted by a listener/viewer. I think you might have some interesting thoughts on this. They write in and ask, when does treasure become trash? Which could be applied to this entire conversation we've been having. I didn't put that together till right now.
Oh, man. I think, first off, all treasure becomes trash over time, right?
Yeah.
Like that's sort of what time is. Time is the process through which treasure becomes trash.
Yeah, we can say that's life.
It's a time is the increasing of entropy. But here's my honest answer, and I this might be a little too dark for what I think was probably a pretty funny question. Okay. But that's where I'm at right now, Grace. My honest answer is that treasure tends to become trash when you get it.
When you get it?
Yeah, like when you acquire the treasure that you've wanted all this time in your life, that you've worked
a car
for, and you really want this treasure. Like, I'll give you an example. When The Fault in Our Stars was published, I had a really good first week, and it was incredible. Like, it sold more copies in its first week than all of my previous books had sold in 7 years.
Yeah.
And I was like, I want to get a car. I'd never had a new car before, and Sarah was like, "Yeah, you should get a car." Not least because she hated my car, and so I did. I bought my dream car, a 2012 Chevy Volt.
Nice.
Metallic. I designed the whole thing. I got a sunroof, which I'd never had in my. It turns out that I hate sunroofs. That's why I'd never had them.
You'll never know unless you tried it, though.
Right, but the treasure immediately became trash because I was like, "Oh, the sun can come in from the top now."
Yeah.
Like the sun has a new angle of attack. I gave that to the sun.
So the way this item is described, it does exactly what it is. Okay. It's a roof for the sun.
I should have seen this coming.
You know what? They should have explained this
somehow
more.
I didn't. And when I was designing my car on the Chevy.com website, I was like, this is a masterwork, a true treasure. This is the most
David.
Beautiful car. Yes, this is my David. This is the most beautiful. I am going to drive down the streets of Indianapolis and every head will turn and people will say, "Oh my God, who's driving that Volt?"
That's what they say.
And then it arrived. And I was like, this is a compact sedan with a sunroof.
Yep,
There's
yep,
a
yep.
there's actually a lot of people in Indianapolis with compact sedans. Many of them chose gray as their color,
Hmm.
and I don't stand out at all.
Interesting. Yeah, as soon as you notice something, it's everywhere.
Yeah.
That I agree with the literal interpretation of that. I also think what you were kind of saying about like the metaphorical interpretation of it, that like I thought you were going to say that when you got the success of your book, you didn't know what else to do. And so the treasure of having this best-selling book suddenly became trash because it was done and over with. And now what do? You're left with the pressure to do something new that keeps up with
that can not possibly succeed on anything like the scale of the previous thing.
Exactly. Because I do think that part of treasure, depends on what you're talking about, but there is something to the definition of treasure being a thing you desire that you don't have yet.
Yeah.
This idea of something or this goal or something.
It's something you're reaching for.
Yeah.
And then I do think, like, I want to be clear that I'm super, super grateful for the success of The Fault in Our Stars and for that Chevy Bolt, which I've had for now almost 10 years. And I don't want to sound in any way ungrateful for it, but you're absolutely right that in the wake of that, you're like, oh God, like, what am I going to do? Like, what am I'm certainly never going to write another book that does that well. People are going to say, oh, he's fallen off, and they'll be right. Like.
But I also think that, like, I guess in a more universal sense, depending, like, let's say you're talking about, like, I love this lamp and I got it finally and it works well and it's beautiful and it's great and it's treasure. And for like 3 years, it's the most beautiful functional thing. And then it gets knocked off a shelf and part of it chips off and now it no longer kind of works. And it's become, I'm holding on to it because it used to be my favorite thing that I worked for and got. But now it's just this constantly eroding love that I have because this thing doesn't actually do its full function like it used to. And all my emotional attachment is trying to rationalize the functionality that's lost in this thing.
So maybe then treasure, the real, like we have to do the work to make the definition of treasure to include a lot of what we have. Like we have to do the work to remind ourselves to be grateful for the treasure that is with us. Yeah. Even if, like, I actually have a lamp that is very similar to that. And we really wanted this lamp. It's a beautiful lamp. We got the lamp. The moment we got it, I like turned it on and I realized in that moment that the little turner oner thing hits the light bulb over and over and over again. And like, it's as close to a perpetual motion machine as has ever been invented in the history of humans.
Oh, man.
And so here's this wonderful lamp that we do treasure. Yeah. But if you turn it on for the next 6 to 7 minutes, you're going to hear dink, dink.
Yeah.
Dink,
telltale heart
dink,
in your own home.
Telltale heart style. So, but if I can just learn to love that lamp as it is, then it can go from treasure to trash back to treasure.
So it's on us. It's
on us. We got to do the work.
We have to do the work. That's the general theme for this entire episode. John, thank you so much. We've reached the end. I really appreciate you taking time to talk to me about a variety of things. But before we wrap up completely, we like to gift our guest for making time a personalized horoscope from us to you. We are not astrologers. That we had to put that out there, but Melissa just put it in the chat if you'd like to read it out loud.
Dear Virgo, maiden of the stars, the South Node in Sagittarius will push you to let go of all your own bad opinions and any false narratives that have held you back, such as an abnormal sneeze. Psych, all sneezes are abnormal because sneezing is not normal. This is an old joke on Dear Hank and John where a listener was told by their doctor that sneezing is never normal. And ever since then, every time I sneeze, like, I mean, this has now been more than a year, I think. Every single time I sneeze, I mutter under my breath, sneezing is not normal. I never sneeze. And it drives Sarah crazy. Like when she hears me sneeze, she runs out of the room so she doesn't have to hear me mumble. Sneezing isn't normal. I never sneeze.
And now it's just become like this weird tick you have about it.
Yeah. Where I kind of have to. I just like to say it. It just I don't know. I'm thinking it, so I figure I should just say it out loud. But yeah, that person who told their patient that sneezing is never normal really had a huge impact on my life too.
And I just finished watching the Dr. Death documentary.
Oh,
and so
goodness.
I would argue to say that might not have been an actual doctor that gave that person that advice.
Yeah, I listened to all 3 seasons of that podcast and like with just sweaty palms.
Yeah, there's a scripted series of it now you can watch with Joshua Jackson as Dr. Death. Pacey.
Which of the 72 streaming services is it on?
It's either on Peacock or Paramount Plus. They're both P's. We click them. They're right next to each other. I forget which one.
Only one of them will survive, but we don't know which one yet.
Yeah, this is why I don't get any brand deals from either of those networks because I cannot keep them straight. I am not great at promoting. John, where can people find you if you want them to on the internet or anything you're up to?
I'm on YouTube at youtube.com/blogbrothers. And also, I mean, that's it really. And occasionally on Crash Course at youtube.com/Crash Course.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for making time. Super appreciate it.
Yeah, it's great to be with you, Grace.
Vice versa. Guys, I hope you enjoyed this episode. Go check out John wherever he is, whatever he's rating, reviewing, or ranting about. And we'll see you next time on another episode of Not Too Deep. Goodbye.
Too deep, too deep, too deep. Not Too Deep with Grace Helbig.
Not Too Deep is a production of Grace Helbig Incorporated, producer Melissa D. Montz, edited by Shireen Lani Yunus, post-production sound by Chris Henry, and an extra special thanks to Flula for the theme music.